All righty. So we are live, folks, here. My name is Forrest Londa. As you know, it's been a little bit longer than I would have liked. And I do not have Quinn with me today, but I have a very special guest, Jeff Wallner. Jeff, please say hi to the people.
Good evening. I've got some big shoes to fill with Quinn, so I'll try to do my best.
Yes, we miss Quinn, but I think you all know life is quite busy for both of us. So it's hard for us to meet up all the time. But thankfully, we have Jeff here today. Jeff is vice chairman of the Fans Forum. He is a sports journalist of 30 years based in Cincinnati, Ohio. I really should let him introduce himself, but I feel like it means a little bit more when I sit here and say things because I'm going to put him on this pedestal so that he can sit here and
No, I
give
don't.
some.
I don't. I don't need that. But yeah, uh, based in Cincinnati, Ohio, I run the Cincinnati Toffees here. I shouldn't say I run. I'm the chair of the Cincinnati Toffees. We have a great group, and everybody helps. Vice chair of the Everton Fans Forum, which is a privilege and an honor to serve this fan base, definitely. And then professionally, been in sports journalism for the better part of 30 years. Currently work mostly for the Associated Press here in Cincinnati. So I'm busy. Everton keeps me busy between the fans forum and everything else and just being a fan. But it's a pleasure to be here anytime I get a chance to talk more about Everton, good, bad, or indifferent. I'm going to take the chance. So thanks for having me.
Of course, Jeff, and we're happy to have you. And Jeff, just to touch on this before we really get into our show, you had a fans forum call today. Are you able to speak a little bit to what y'all talked about today?
Yeah, in general, it was a very lengthy call, roughly 2.5 hours, regarding the migration from Goodison Park to the new stadium. The details will be forthcoming in a few weeks from the club to the fan base, but most of it relates obviously to longtime season ticket holders and season ticket holders in general, who are making this significant change. It's just not just a change from one stadium to another, but really a major cultural shift for this football club. So the club's preparing to make that transition as smooth as possible, and just is asking the fans forum help to assist to make sure that it's as smooth as possible, because these fans deserve that. They deserve it to be a great experience, and obviously this is a historic 2 years that's coming up for Everton Football Club. Nothing quite like they've experienced in their history. So very exciting time, but also a lot of work to be done. So I'm happy to be a part of that.
Yes, I mean it's a lot of change. Moving from our ancestral home in Goodison, where we've been for well over 100 years. You can imagine that there's a lot of work that has to go behind the scenes in terms of how they're going to make that transition as, like you said, as smooth as possible. How are they going to make sure that the fans are fully on board with this, based on everything they put about the stadium, the drone videos, everything. It's really trying to build the scale of the stadium so that people understand that yes, we are leaving this place that has so many beautiful memories for so many people. But it is only so that the club can move forward, so only that the club can increase its profile, and only so that the club can continue to try to build off the rot that we've been sitting on for the better part of 5 years.
Right.
So to get into our show today, we're going to be talking two main topics, and I think you guys know what they are. It is Dan Friedkin finalizing his bid to buy the Toffees. Lots to talk about there. Neither of us are very keyed into the finer details of it all, but we know as much information as you do, so we're going to discuss it and try to see what sort of expectations we have for Friedkin and for Everton going forward, best case, worst case scenarios, that sort of thing. And then we're going to talk Palace on the weekend. In my mind, the best opportunity we have to get the first 3 points of the season, and be able to really get things up and going, especially with players we have coming back. But we're going to start with where we left with Dan Friedkin, up the Friedkin Toffees. Uh, just kind of, we've had so much talk over the past year, really, when you're talking all the way back to 777 and on the ownership situation, how we all know we've needed a new owner, how Mashiri has just not been able to fund the club as he was able to do when he had the Usmanov links. Um, when you saw this news, Jeff, come out, and it was a bit like it was a bit out of the blue in terms of the like there was talks like, oh, well, they've advanced, they're a little bit farther along, and then a day or two later, journalists have dropped some hints, and bang, it is a joint statement. The club have released it. It is official that Dan Friedkin is moving forward quite rapidly and has some exclusivity behind buying the club now.
Yeah, I think just speaking for myself, but I think I speak for most Evertonians that the Friedkin Group was among those that have been involved or rumored to have been involved in having the interest in a takeover of Everton. They were our preferred choice. I think that's because of his uh, history, his success in business, his experience in football, the resources that he has available to him financially. It felt like that this was the best fit among those that had reportedly had interest. Obviously, we know about 777 and John Textor and the period of exclusivity there. But yeah, Dan Friedkin is the one I think that had people more excited than the others. Obviously, he stepped away. I don't use the term just. I don't think that he ever stopped having interest in buying Everton. I think it was more doing their due diligence, which you can't blame them considering the situation with 777 and APAC and Leadenhall. He needed to do his due diligence before he pursued that any further. But I don't think there were for a second Dan Friedkin ever stopped being interested in buying Everton. It's good to be wanted. You like someone who wants your football club, wants to be a part of your football club, and he clearly does.
Yeah, I agree. There have been a lot of names that have been linked with the club, and all the most serious ones have been American, which has been very interesting to me, with 777, with Friedkin, and with John Textor. I know that I personally got a little sucked into John Textor and some of the lip service he was giving Evertonians. I typically tend to lean towards passion, but I understand that in this situation, having an owner who, like you said, is doing the due diligence and who is sitting there and making sure that they're in the wings, getting everything they need to done so that they can turn around and do the right thing for this club. And as they've said, be good custodians of this club. Is very important. And the statements that have come out and the small things that have been said so far in this whole process by the Friedkin Group have been good. I know when we look at their experience in football, we're looking at the fact that they own Roma. They've had Roma since the middle of 2020.
COVID.
It's been since COVID era. They've had 6th place, 7th place finishes pretty much every season. Staying pretty normal. The kind of managers they've had, it's been Mourinho and then Daniel De Rossi, who actually just got sacked and is a big cause for unrest at Roma right now. Whether I think that is probably more the fact that he was a club legend and now they've let him go after a relatively short time after signing a new contract, is probably why Roma fans feel like what the heck is, and then Friedkin turning around and focusing on Everton, and they might feel a little left behind. Do you feel like there's going to be a 2-club ownership, like a sort of player trading model that Friedkin is trying to get, this multi-club ownership, or do you think that he's going to try to move Roma on to be able to focus on Everton?
There's been talk of both, and we won't. It's all speculation at this point. There has been talk that he's looking to sell Roma. He denied that publicly, I believe, recently. Of course, he made his statement the other day. But there was talk of them maybe selling to the Saudis. I don't know that that's necessarily true. So we don't know whether what he's looking at is a multi-club scenario, which is what it would be initially, or if he's thinking Everton is the long game for him. We don't know. I want to try maybe to stay more like focused on the immediate, what he can do for our club immediately, because that's where our needs lie. He's essentially saving our club financially.
The equity he's rolling into the club and the personal responsibility he's taking on for these pretty extensive debts that we have definitely speak to the immediacy of the scenario that we're in as a club, and the fact that he's willing to come in and put so much on the line.
Yeah, and I think the Roma fans, it has been a little bit of a roller coaster with them, because he came in, made the big splash. Jose Mourinho spent 100 million, and he was, they're parading him around town, but we know how quickly things can shift. We know how quickly things can shift in football. I remember Evertonians being quite excited when Mashiri bought the team. But obviously, you don't know where things are going. Beyond that, nobody has a crystal ball.
Yeah.
But it remains to be seen whether his plan for Everton is to come in and make a big splash. Does this get finalized by December? Does he make a big splash in January? Does he look, at the managerial situation? Does he look at the director of football? Is he coming in and is there a lot of upheaval, a lot of initial change, or because of the way things happen in Roma, are there lessons learned that he's then taking to Everton and he's deciding, what, a little bit more of a calculated approach here? Obviously, our needs are critical in terms of we have one goal, and it's the same goal we've had for the past 3 years, and that's to stay in the Premier League and be a Premier League club when we move into the new stadium. It's pretty straightforward. That's why Sean Dyche is here. Sean Dyche wouldn't be here if our goals were Champions League.
True.
So, but it'll be interesting to see how he takes that experience at Roma and how that applies to how he approaches his first few weeks or certainly months as Everton's owner.
I agree. Yeah, that's a really good point too. It's something that speaks to him again, like having the experience with a club the size of Roma, which I would say are very similarly sized to Everton in terms of the stature in their own country, in terms of stature across Europe. I would say probably Roma have had a bit more recent success in terms of being in European competitions and being able to have the ability to be in European competitions. They're able to get themselves on the European stage a bit more, but still Everton are a top Premier League club, even if they haven't been playing as one on the pitch. They are a top supported, well-known, famous Premier League club. And it's a really good point that he's had these experiences and learned these lessons at Roma, where he's maybe tried for the big names and tried kind of like the Mashiri approach, which is what we did, where we were trying for the big names and buying the proven players, 27-year-olds for 40 million pounds, Sigurdsson, whoever, and taking these chances, putting somebody like Steve Walsh in as director of football. And now Friedkin can look at both of our situation and how we've acted as a club and how he's ran Roma and said, well, how can I merge these two? How can I take what I've learned and build a model for a club that will be sustainable and will win? And that's really what we all want as Evertonians. It's just a little bit of consistency and a little, it's just a touch of what Martinez's first season was, because that was special. That was so special. I went over twice that season. It was so amazing to see us win every week and to be able to bring that back is something that Friedkin, I would hope, is really looking to do. Whether that's something that can happen within the next year or two, I don't know. When we talk about the Dyche situation and the managerial situation with Friedkin, I'd imagine that he's going to give Dyche, unless the deal is finalized in December, it's January, we're still in the bottom three, and he's like, I have to let Dyche go. The players have come back and he's still not performing. I'd imagine that he's going to let him see out the rest of his contract and then figure it out from there based on how we're playing, based on how the fans are reacting, and based on where he thinks the club can go with the personnel that we have.
Yeah. I heard an Italian journalist just the other day make an interesting comment. He said that Friedkin won't be surprised by or taken back by the passion of Evertonians, because Roma fans will literally show up at the owner's front door with pitchforks and torches. He's like, after dealing with the Roma fans, he's like, no, he won't be surprised when he encounters passionate and maybe angry Evertonians at one time or another. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I think if the scenario you just pointed out, if that exists in December, then Dyche is probably, the club probably makes the decision anyway. I don't think that would necessarily be, Friedkin doing it. I don't anticipate that. Let me just we'll talk about Palace.
Yeah,
We'll talk about Palace in a minute, but I feel like that's going to be the start of us getting ourselves on a little more sound footing, and I think in the end we'll be comfortable. So, our immediate needs as a football club are to get our debts paid, to move into the new stadium in a better financial situation, be free of any PSR concerns.
Yeah,
and then we can move forward from there. That's where Dan Fried, that's his primary focus right now. Has nothing to do with the manager, the director of football, transfers in January, none of it. Dan Friedkin's whole role here is to ride in on his white horse, get our debts paid off, get us free from PSR, and get us into the new stadium on better financial footing. That's it.
Really, just bring the club back under control of one person, right? Because
stability,
yeah, truly, because it just hasn't been there for so long, and we all know how much it's taken out of us as fans. I know it's hard to look ahead past because nothing's been finalized, and we know that even like there was a huge period of exclusivity with 777, and that's obviously a very different scenario. They were from the start were very like, why are we even talking to them in the first place? And Friedkin is much more of the stable owner with the experience that we're looking for. But there's always just this back of my mind, like, well, there's a lot of time between now and December when they're talking about this might be finalized. I don't know what could happen. It would hurt, but it would not totally surprise me if something happened to where, again, like even 777 and Everton released a joint statement. There were joint statements released in the past. So I can imagine there's some, I hope there's not trepidation amongst Evertonians. When I first heard this news, I was still like, okay, well, we've done this before. Like, is this going to be a scenario where we're sitting here and getting hurt again and finding the fact that we still cannot move this club on? There's still something substantial missing in terms of this deal.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think Friedkin would be to this point if he hadn't resolved things with APAC, and Leadenhall is not going to stand in the way. We've gotten to this point because he feels comfortable proceeding with the layers of approval, essentially, ending with the Premier League. Once we get to this point, I just don't see, if there were any surprises, frankly, then that would be kind of on Friedkin for missing something.
Yeah, exactly.
I firmly believe that someone of his stature, their stature, the Friedkin group, not just talking just about Dan, that they would be at this point in the negotiations of a $600 million, acquisition, and have something still, a stone uncovered.
Road, right?
Yeah, I feel comfortable, but this is Everton, so.
Exactly.
But I do. Yeah, these guys are. These are big time business people that have. It's amazing what they've done with Gulf States Toyota, and and it's funny to compare car company to a football club. But what they've achieved. I mean, we're talking major investment, a ton of smart people. They know what they're doing business wise. They know what they're doing financially. From a financial aspect. So these are extremely smart people. And I like that they don't just have money, that they also have experienced the ups and downs of running a European football club. Yeah, and that's what we need. It's one thing to just ride in with a big wad of cash. It's another thing to actually understand how difficult it is to run a football club. And I actually, come to think of it, I kind of like that he's experienced the good and the bad at Roma. If he's just experienced the good, he doesn't know how to deal with the hard times. Yeah. He's seen both at Roma in a span of barely 3.5, 4 years.
Yeah.
So that's good, because then he'll bring that experience to us, and that's what we need.
When you look at, and this is more looking at the model that we want to run at Everton, what is an idea of a model that you would want to see Friedkin implement at Everton? Are you of the mind that we should be bringing in young players and selling them on for profit, a la so many clubs, Borussia Dortmund, Brighton, etc.? Should we be trying to go along the route that we've had with Shiri in the past and finding established players and trying to win now? What, in your mind, what is a realistic 5-year plan for Friedkin at Everton?
I'm kind of, on one hand, I'm kind of waiting to see how all of the Premier League stuff shakes out,
Yeah. Sure.
because what it takes to compete and by competing, I mean avoid relegation battles, compete for Europe, be stable in the Premier League, might not be what you need to do in 5 years.
Yeah.
There's a lot of change coming to that league. If I answer that question now, I would say it has to be a balance. You have to do both, right? You have to develop through your academy, not just for players that are going to play for you, but players you're going to be able to sell for a decent sum. And we've kind of done that. We've had some success in that area. But then the big part is you have to invest in your first team. And if you ask me what's the first thing we have to invest in, for me, it's depth.
Yeah.
Starting 11 is good. We have one injury and we're scraping the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm never too overly enthusiastic about outgoings as some other fans are. Some fans are like, get rid of this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy. And I'm like, oh, you want 3 keepers on the bench? Like,
Right,
we don't have any players.
Wow.
At least Mason Holgate's a body. So I think that's the biggest thing, and that's what sets us apart. The clubs at the top of the table are bringing guys off the bench that are legitimate players that want to play and are okay with being on the bench. I don't know that we've had that in how long. A player who could start a lot of places is happy to be on the bench at Everton. But I think that's the biggest thing is you have to do it all, right? I don't think you can say you can't just splash money. You can't just build with youth. You kind of have to do it all. So,
but it's life is about balance, but more so than ever in football, the balance of the team is so important. And I would agree that we had very little depth and have had very little depth at Everton for a long time. It has been, and to your point that people just want these players to go sometimes. I mean, they get frustrated. They see bad performances. They said, see Mason Holgate go out on loan to Southampton and come back after a couple of months and say, well, like, why is he still at the club? But it's exactly that. It's not as easy as, well, get rid of them and then just bring somebody else in because, well, you've got rid of this player. Maybe you've gotten a fee. Maybe you haven't just because you're trying to get rid of him. Maybe you're still paying a part of his wage to wherever he's gone. And now you're saying, well, how can we realistically bring in somebody who's of at least the same quality to replace them? It's not so cut and dry. You're not just going to go pick somebody from the Championship or pick somebody from the lower Premier League team or from Europe and say, well, we can just get him, especially with the financial situation we've been in. It's just not realistic. Buying players in general is barely realistic. The fact that, making player sales is the only way we've been able to buy anybody has been the reality for us for 3 to 4 to 5 years now. It's just we've had times where we've been able to spend a little bit of money, but the deals have been structured so that we're not spending any money in that moment. We're having to fight against a PSR. We're having to fight against the way our financial situation has been. And that's what I hope, and I know what you hope, and what every Evertonian hopes with Friedkin. He comes in and is able to strike that balance. So we're not looking at like, well, gosh, we would have loved to kept Onana, but we can't because we have to move him on because we need that money. So the first club that comes in with a bid that fits our profile, get him out of here. It's fine. Say Calvert-Lewin, we wanted a certain amount of money for him, and we had to stick by that because there was no way we were going to get the replacement we wanted in the time that we had if we didn't get that money for him. Yes, he might run his contract out now and sign for somebody for free. He might sign a new contract. He's had a decent start to the season, and he's staying injury free. He's playing like he really cares. I made some criticisms of Calvert-Lewin at the beginning of the season, making it look like he didn't really care. That's reactionary. He's stepped up a lot. There's this flow to the club and this flow to our attack that's starting to develop within Dye and the team. And I would say this is probably a good moment for us to turn to Palace. I think the speculation with Friedkin, it can only go so far, right? Especially with the fact that the deal's not done. And we know what the first steps are. After that, it's just saying, well, this, that, or the other. Anything could happen. Yeah. Anything could happen. And really, we need to focus on getting our first win this weekend against Palace, back at Goodison. In my mind, it has to be 3 points. Anything else is Sean Dyche getting looked at very heavily. Jeff, what do you think?
I feel like it'll be the first 3 points of the season. And partly because just watching the club each week, and we should have, as we know, we should have 3 wins already at least. But I think you've watched the team kind of evolve during its extended preseason again, which we can, discuss why we continue to have extended preseasons.
Yeah.
And then the health of the squad obviously is huge, and we just talked about it. We don't have a lot of depth. We have very little depth at all. So when you're without a Jared Branthwaite and you're without a Nathan Patterson, and you've got a couple of other guys ill, and it completely just straps our squad. But this match will be, for the first time, hopefully, you have Jared in there. You have that Tarky Jared partnership, which changes everything for us. At least did last season. It may take him to bed in, but I don't know. I feel like I think he'll step right in and make an impact. And then we'll have Ghana back in there, and though the squad overall will be a little bit healthier, and we seem to get well against Palace at home. I don't know why that is, because Palace has actually been a pretty decent team. They've got good players. We talk about Eze all the time. But I feel like this will be the first win. I'm cautiously optimistic. The only thing that makes me a little nervous, but I feel better about with Jared back and having that stability again, is, getting out in front at home on Saturday. I believe we will. I think maybe we get out in front 2-0, and then we have flashbacks.
Yeah.
But I think that's where that the stability that Branthwaite brings with Tarkowski, it just kind of stabilizes things. I think we'll score. I definitely think we'll score goals, which hasn't really been our issue this year.
Not at all.
In the last few matches. And we've gotten a lot of people involved in that. Njai will be excited to play at home. I think he's excited to play anywhere.
This is long.
I think we've fallen in love with that guy. Good transfer window. I've liked all the guys that have come in. We haven't seen a whole lot of Lindstrom, but obviously Arabunam has been great, and Njai has been great. I know people would like to see more of Jake O'Brien, but now we have Branthwaite back. So
I'd love to speak a little bit to your comment on Eric Bunham, because I know that he's a young guy. He's not had a lot of opportunities at this top level quite yet, and he is still learning his game in midfield, which is the hardest position in football. There's so much pitch you have to cover. There's so much you have to know as a player. So you didn't get to watch Leicester. Decore and Mangala started, and I thought that they were very solid in midfield. I think until the second half, when we really just kind of fell apart and did kind of what we tend to do, which is defend a lead more than try to build on it. We looked really good. They looked good. I'm interested because Eric Bunham, for all his endeavor, there are times where he shows his inexperience, where he gets caught on the ball, where he doesn't quite make the right pass, where he is learning his trade. I am very interested to see, now that we have a decent amount of midfield depth with him. So we're looking at Ganagay, Decore, Mangala, Garner, Eric Bunham. That's 5 right there, right? And then you have Jack, what's his name? I'm sorry, Harrison Armstrong, kind of sitting on the wings, kind of waiting. He didn't look fantastic against Southampton, but he's a young guy coming into a game where we're not really caring if we win or not. That was shown based on the way we played. I'm interested to see how he deals with having a little bit of a spell out of the team. I don't remember him. I think he came on as a sub against Leicester. I think we were still all over the place, as tends to be. We get under the caution, we just continue to drop back until they score. I'm interested to see how he develops, because I think he has a bit of a ways to go. I know he got those first few starts of the season. I know he did some good things, but there were definitely times watching him where I said, yeah, he's not quite there. He's not quite there, but I know there's a player there. It's been good, because again, we look at that PSR trade with him and Dobbin and Villa, and we see, where this is a player who's going to come in. Is he really going to play much? Is he going to go on loan? Is he just, a U23s player? He's come in, and he, based off his own work ethic and his desire to play at this level, he's created a role for himself on that team, and now it's on him to polish himself, to polish his game. and to make himself a player that Sean Dyche has to pick. That's going to be his next step as a player. I would love to talk a little bit about McNeil, and kind of how you've seen him change since Ndai's coming to the team and kind of taken his spot on the left. I think even McNeil even came out this week and said, I love playing central because I'm just more involved in the game. I think that speaks volumes to where he feels comfortable on this team. And I think even though he is very left-footed and everything he does comes off one way, he's the sort of like that Arjen Robben. No, he's not Arjen Robben, but he's sort of that player who's like, yes, this is all he can do. But if he does it very well. And when he does it well, it creates things. He is our best creator so far in midfield. Have you liked him being moved centrally as well?
I'm not sure. As far as whether that is a long-term solution or not, because we've seen what he can do, the last season or two, and the way that he is creating things and the way that he's creating scoring opportunities for himself. So I don't know. It's what I like is that I like the competition because we don't have that at a lot of positions. We don't have that competition. So that's good because that pushes all of them to be better. And if that's where McNeil is going to need to play, then he needs to get better in that spot, and that's up to him.
Yeah.
So, but I'm interested to see how they, what he does on, how Dyche, does that on Saturday.
Lindstrom has had a couple of starts now and had a decent amount of playing time this season, and I don't think he's looked totally out of place. But he is somebody. It's between him and Jack Harrison, and it's on that right side. And they're both fairly similar profiles. They're both trying to get onto their left foot. They're both trying to play inside. Neither one's an out-and-out winger on that right side because they're both players who prefer their left foot. It's been interesting to see Lindstrom kind of try to find his feet in the Premier League. He didn't have a lot of time in Napoli. Obviously, he went on loan because he wasn't getting that game time at Napoli. And to see him come out and try, he's got, again, like the profile of the Sean Dyche player is all throughout this team. It is the endeavor. Nobody in this team gets carried. Everybody works hard. From Ndai, from Calvert-Lewin, back to Mikolenko, Ashley Young. Everybody works hard. There are no passengers in this team in terms of sitting back. So he has the endeavor. Sometimes I watch him and I just know he's just trying a little bit too hard. He's just trying to get through one extra person, trying to take one extra touch, and not letting things come a little naturally to him. And then we see Jack Harrison come on, and they're very similar players in terms of they both try really hard. They try really hard, but sometimes you don't need to try too hard. Sometimes you just need to just make the right decision.
Well, Jack physically, is this a fair statement? Jack physically is more built for the Premier League than Jesper.
100%.
So that benefits him. Like you said, they're similar players, but Jack can do the things he can do because he's able to. He doesn't get. Nobody's going to body him off the ball or
correct.
So.
And then we're looking at who's going to be key for us against Palace. It comes back to Ndai. It comes back to how we can get the ball to him and how we can get him in 1v1 situations to be able to take a defender on. Because what I really like about Ndai is that even though he plays on the left, he is not your typical winger. He's not going out there and trying to beat somebody for pace. He is so tricky, and he does so well winning these 1v1 versus players. I don't think I've seen anybody be able to hold tight on to him for more than one or two plays with the ball. He is so good at keeping his body between the ball and the man. He's so good at keeping his balance. And there's been so many times where they put out that Skilliman and Die comp on Twitter. Everton did, and that was nice, And I think I saw somebody say gosh, this club don't know how to act. We finally get a player with the skills of Ndai, and we're putting out a compilation after 4 or 5 games. I get that. But it also speaks to the lack of excitement we've had in this team for a long time.
Right.
We've seen a team that's been shoving long balls up to Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Abdoulaye Doucouré for 2 years now, trying to make something happen. And finally, we have a bit of fluidity in the team.
Creativity. Yeah.
Creativity. We don't know what to do because it's just holy cow! It's been so long. It feels like it's been. I don't know. Honestly, since a player like Njai, to me, it feels like it's been since like Pinar in terms of like his actual grades. Like
Yeah.
we could talk about Damari Gray. We could talk about this is the thing. I'm trying to pick out other players. There's not really been that. Like Anthony Gordon, but even he was so direct when he was with us. And Jai is direct, but he's such a team player too. He's not a selfish player. That is what really
Right.
strikes me about Jai. He is not selfish. He wants to share this team. He makes the runs. Again, he has that work ethic that Sean Dyche looks for, and I just really hope he stays at the club for a while. I hope he stays healthy this season. I will be devastated if he gets hurt and misses a long stretch because he's the kind of player who can really. I expect him to have 5 goals, 7 assists sort of season, 7 goals, 7 assists. I expect him to have a decent season. He's the kind of player in a year or two he can be having 10 and 10, 12 and 10. Like he can really build himself as a player into a true star in the Premier League. I would
Yeah,
love
and Deich is going to have to manage his workload,
yeah.
which is going to be hard to do. And it's not going to make us happy.
Yeah. Well,
The
this speaks to
days,
the depth of the squad too.
right? Yeah, but he's going to have to manage him just to keep him. This season's a grind. There's a long way to go. And this is a guy who works hard, he puts his body on the line. So that's the key to keep him healthy. But that's a key for a lot. That's key for all of our players because again, we don't have a whole lot of depth. But so fun to watch. So fun to watch.
It's again, it's very exciting, and yes, to speak to your point about the depth, that's exactly it. What we've seen in these past few games where we've been winning and we take off and die, and it just kind of falls apart. Our fluidity, our sense of attack really falls apart, and
Yeah.
that's going to be a big problem for Sean Dyche to solve this season
Yeah.
because it will be a repetitive theme. We're going to need to find a formula that works where we can bring him off on 60, 70 minutes if we're winning and not have this team fall apart and just get under the cloche and immediately fall back because it happened against Villa, it happened against Leicester, it happened against who else did we go to? Bournemouth. Like it's just the same with everything. Like we've sat back and just sat back and brought him off, and it's just in the fluidity of the team plus. So
What I'm concerned about, or what I find the most curious about the games that we've lost, the points that we've dropped for winning positions, isn't that Sean Dyche's whole mantra?
yeah,
He's the points protector, right? That's how he keeps, he developed his reputation as being a manager who keeps clubs up because his style of play, his matches aren't typically 3-2. They certainly aren't winning 2-0, lose 3-2, and we've already done it twice.
Yeah.
So I don't know like what your thoughts are on is Sean Dyche taking a different approach this year than he does typically in the past because this isn't what he does. And I feel like we've been so open. Now we don't have Jared. There have been other kind of personnel, things that have been impacting the way we've been playing. But whatever happened to getting up 1-0 and just Sean Dyche just battles it, you just find a way to protect the points and fight through it.
Yeah.
Instead, we're flying around, we're scoring goals, and then we're so wide open, and it just doesn't look like Dyche ball to me.
When I look at those 3-2 losses to Bournemouth and to Villa, and you look at the way the team capitulated, it's got to be shared responsibility between the players and the manager. It always is. It's never, unless it's straight mistakes like say Jack Harrison's for Villa's second, where he just the ball he's awkward clearance, the ball just falls to Ollie Watkins. I think that it needs to come down to personnel, players like Michael Keane and Ashley Young and James Garner at right back. Like those in and of itself show that we don't have the depth, which shows that players are either too tired when they get to that point, and then they're losing their focus. There's no communication between them. And it's a big thing for me with Michael Keane is his communication. It's something I've talked about many times, but I don't think he talks as a center back, and as a defender, you need to talk. He does not talk. And Tarkowski, as much as a leader he is, he's not much of a talker either. He talks, but he's kind of just barking orders rather than kind of trying to point people in the right direction. The reason that Branthwaite comes in is because Branthwaite is the one who positions. He tells
Mhm.
He communicates with Tarkovsky, and Keane isn't doing that. Keane is so lost in his head sometimes. And I think that shows. And it's not just Michael Keane. I think what we're also a piece of the puzzle that we're missing at Everton is, and I'm going to say it's a midfielder like Amadou Onana who can put his foot on the ball and dictate tempo. We don't really have that right now.
Right.
Gay isn't that kind of player. Mangala hasn't shown himself to be that kind of player yet. Decore definitely isn't that kind of player. I don't think Garner quite. I think even though he's probably the one who has the most ability to be that kind of player, I don't think he's quite there. Quite there. And then Eric Boonham is again like he's developing that experience. Maybe he can be that kind of player one day, but right now it's just all kind of panic stations sometimes for us, especially once we concede that first goal. It becomes what's the plan now? This didn't work. What's the plan now? We don't have that backup plan. Maybe again, that might come down to personnel. It might come down to the fact that this is just the way we have to play right now with the players that we have. And again, we could come out on Saturday and it could be Branthwaite in, Nikolenko in, probably Ashley Young at right back, and somebody like Gay back in midfield, and it could be a romp. We could win 3-0, 4-0, and we're laughing and saying, well, look how solid we were. We were just missing Jared Branthwaite. But it could turn around and truly be a capitulation again. And that's going to tell us the story of Sean Dyche this season. Seeing his change as a manager, his progression as a manager at Everton has been really interesting. He came. I went to a couple games when he first was here. Like the Leicester 2-2. I'm pretty sure that was him. Or was that Lampard? I think it might have been Lampard. I can't quite remember. That was when we won against Brighton 5-1. That was Sean Dyche. That's right. Yeah. I've seen his progression where we were trying to just straight play counterattacking football. And now we last season it was a bit of both. We were a little like dogs of war. We were trying to be battling in midfield. We were just trying to get the points where we needed to, winning games in spurts, losing a 15-game streak where we're not winning any games at all. But again, it comes down to injuries. I'm interested to see his metamorphosis this season because I feel like he personally feels like he needs to change as a manager to be able to stay at Everton. I think he really desperately wants to stay at this club because I don't think he'll ever manage a club bigger than Everton. I just don't. I think his next steps are clubs like West Ham and clubs like Leicester. I don't know, all these other clubs who are going to look to him once he leaves Everton as somebody that can save them from relegation. I think he desperately wants to get away from that, and he's trying to find a way to play some sort of progressive style. He's trying. Like I know there is a desire in him to stay at Everton and be the manager who leads us to Bradley Moore, to be the manager who can get us into European football. I know he has ambition.
Yeah, and that would be interesting if that's his thought process because he was, and he used the word custodian today, which is what he is. He was brought here for one purpose. He was brought here to keep us up.
Yep.
I would be really surprised if he believes that the way that he's managed the games so far this year is the way to keep us up.
I know we should talk about his subs because they've been top. They've been what have kind of lost games for us. And again, we're talking about managing the workload for a die. We're talking about like the Villa game where we clearly needed to take Eric Boonham off. He could barely run on 75, 70 minutes, and we were struggling with him on the pitch. We were just tossing the ball up and just hoping something stuck. And he could. I mean, you could tell how visibly exhausted he was. There is a lot of talk with that. I just feel like he can see the change coming at Everton. He can see, wow, this club is about to find a way to get back to where it wants to be. And I just think he wants to be a part of that process. Whether or not the way he's managed games so far this season is just him, like he's talked about experimenting a lot lately. I don't think he's really talked much about experimenting in his whole career in terms of the way he plays football. He's talked about it a lot in terms of trying to find the formula that wins the games with the players we have right now. That, in my mind, speaks to him trying to find some change as a manager, to try to change his label as a manager so he can stay at the club.
Yeah. Well, I will say that he's not. Nobody would look at this season and say, "Okay, well, I know this is my last season." Obviously, he wants to be the manager next year when we move into the new stadium. There's no question about that. But your personnel, maybe the guys we brought in this transfer window kind of change things up a little bit. But this team has been built to be a Sean Dyche team. Not Sean Dyche version 2, but Sean Dyche, so he's got to manage the personnel that he has, and he has to understand that, and I go back and forth. I got in, the big argument with people after Bournemouth that, that's all on Dyche. And it's like, well, no, when you have a 2-0 lead in the 87th minute and you lose 3-2, you can't tell me that the guys on the field weren't, couldn't hold a 2-0 lead for
Truly, right.
9 minutes or 8 minutes or whatever it was. So but Sean Dyche has always been about protecting points, and even the way things went late in those matches, we should come away with a point at minimum. You come away with a point, and okay, you've got a little foundation to build on moving forward. But we lost all of them.
Yep.
So yeah.
Good. Well, I just to touch on one more topic before we go to our Q&A. He has, since he's came here at this club, he has had 3 instances where he has picked Michael Keane through a series of games before being forced to make a change. Yuri Mina, Jared Branthwaite, and now it's been Michael Keane until Branthwaite has come back. Why do you have any insight into why he might continue to stick with Michael Keane over Jake O'Brien? Because we've seen O'Brien play a couple times. He played against Doncaster's 3-0 win, but it's League 2 opposition. He played against Southampton. I don't think he looked awful, but there were times where I thought he was just a bit slow. Do you think it's really just favorites? Do you think he just sees these mistakes that happen in games and think, well, that is not totally Michael's fault? It's like I don't always understand that as a manager. I understand having favorites. I understand having these players you rely on. But I don't understand continuously going back to a player that you've had to replace multiple times, that that you directly had to replace. And once you've done it, you've gotten the results you've needed.
Right. I'm really surprised, and this is me. This is the reporter in me, and I know things are different. The way that reporter-manager, reporter-player relationship is different in England than it might be here. But shocked that question hasn't been hammered home to him in every news conference that he's had.
Yeah.
Because it's really glaring. It's and it's not an attack on Michael Keane or even Sean Dyche, but it's a basic question. Okay, why? It could even be prefaced as, you don't even mention Keane. You just say, what have you seen from Jake O'Brien, and what does he need to do to get into the first team? What is he not doing now?
Yep.
That is preventing him, is the question, from getting into the first team. And I would love to hear what he would have to say.
Yeah. And I think
it's not Michael Keane sucks, you should get him out of there.
Right, exactly.
It's what is Jake O'Brien not doing to earn a spot in the first team?
Yeah.
And maybe he gives the Branthwaite answer.
Yeah, truly.
That I just don't feel like he's ready, to come in, and it took him forever to finally put stubbornness.
Pride.
Being pragmatic, being old school, maybe, I don't know. We also don't see training. And in any sport, when a guy is not playing or a guy is playing that you think shouldn't, sometimes during the week things are different. But then we're not talking about just a mistake or two. With Michael Keane, there are some deficiencies there. Yep. But maybe, we don't know, maybe Jake O'Brien's deficiencies during the week every week are
greater
or more glaring. We don't know. But I would love for somebody to ask the question, and I don't feel like anybody has ever asked him that question.
I feel like Dyche tends to get ahead of stuff like that. He's even said about Jake O'Brien, and he said it about multiple players, it's Premier League experience. He doesn't have a Premier League experience. He doesn't have a Premier League experience. Yeah. That's great, Sean, but that's like saying somebody didn't have the work experience. You're never going to get the work experience until you give them the chance. He's never going to get the experience until you give him the chance. That isn't, we're trying to shore up, a 2-0 lead that we lost. It's 2-2. Let's bring in Jake O'Brien because we just are trying to sit back and take the point home. It doesn't need to be the situation where you throw him, you give him an opportunity to prove himself. And I don't think that's really happened for Jake yet. Right. And I feel like based on the way this team has played so far, if I were Jake O'Brien, I'd be a little like, well, gosh, we've made all these mistakes and it's been the same players playing. Why can't I get the chance to come in and what's the worst that's going to happen? We're going to lose again. Okay, we've already lost so many times. Let's try something. He talks a lot about experimenting. Try something different. Even if you just play a 3 at the back to get Jake O'Brien in there. I don't know.
And also what we don't know either, and this is the other thing that I wish, would be asked, but what we also don't know is what conversations Sean Dyche has had with Jake O'Brien and what conversations he's had with Michael Keane about their situations. Does Jake O'Brien have an understanding of, okay, here's the timeline for me? Or, because it would be awful if it's just week to week, hey, maybe this is my week to play, and then you don't.
Yeah.
I would be really shocked if Sean Dyche, with all of his experience and his personality, that he's doing it that way. I'm sure he's communicating with Jake O'Brien
Hope so.
during the week, and there's an understanding you're not going to play on Saturday. But I would be really curious as to what his mindset is. I'm not even really saying, because he may have a perfectly solid, reasonable, rational explanation.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just up to Michael Keane to play better. So I don't know, but it is a curious situation. The fans have a right to ask, and I wish that Sean Dyche would get asked a little more often, and because the fans deserve to know, even in generalities, hey, what's going on? Why do you pick this guy or this guy?
He's a new player. We just signed him for so much money. He's got this first team experience playing in Lyon at a decent level, at a good league. He's played in cup finals. Like he's proven himself as a player to an extent. So again, like what?
And Michael Keane has not. Michael Keane has awful moments.
Yeah.
Sometimes Michael Keane is pretty good for stretches.
Mm-hmm.
But he just has awful. He's very much a confidence player. He's not. There's physical and there's mental, and certain players just have this innate ability to make snap decisions and make the correct ones.
Yeah.
And Michael Keane goes to make a decision in a split second. He's unsure whether that his decision is the correct one, even though it might be, and that's when he gets himself into trouble. And unfortunately, in his position, when he makes those mistakes, they're going to lead to goals.
Mm-hmm. Exactly that. I mean, we've seen it a couple times this season, and we are pretty set that he's gonna get dropped from the team. So we just gotta hope that Branthwaite comes in, is ready to go, and that we can move on and move on. That's all we can do.
I will say this though, Michael Keane. We talk about depth. I'm glad we have Michael Keane. I'm glad we have Michael Keane.
Yep.
But not in the first team every week.
Yeah.
But we need somebody like Michael Keane with his experience on the bench, ready to step in if somebody gets injured, or you need depth like that. You need depth like Michael Keane. People are like, well, Michael Keane's not good enough to be on our team. No, that's not true. He's not good enough to be in our starting 11. But you need players like Michael Keane. So I don't mind Michael Keane being on the team. I just, if you have another option, he has to earn his spot like everybody else. We talk about the competition in the midfield. There should be competition between O'Brien and Keane. It shouldn't just be, hey, Keno, you're going to play every week.
I'm going to give Keane another chance. We're going to give him another chance.
Right.
Not there yet, O'Brien.
Yeah.
Another week. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, what's your prediction for Saturday?
I'm going to go 3-1. Didn't we beat Palace 3-1? Was it last year?
I think it was 3-0 last year at home.
Was it 3-0? Okay.
3-0.
I'll go 3-0. They'll score a goal, but we'll score a bunch, and so
I'm saying 3-0. Yeah, I do think we'll have a good day. That I think we will limit Palace's attack. I think Branthwaite back will change the confidence of this team in general, in terms of being able to have the confidence in their back line. I'm really hoping for another Ndiaye goal, for another Dominic Calvert-Lewin goal. I still have hopes that Calvert-Lewin will sign a new contract. Personally, I would love that. Yeah. Who knows? I mean, we're not going to know more about that until January, when there's real talk of it, and it'll be what Dan Friedkin wants at that time too.
Right.
But hoping for 3 points is necessary, is a must, I think. And let me ask you this. This is actually a good question that we'll end on this before Q&A. If we don't win this game, how long do you think Sean Dyche has?
I don't think it'll be immediate, but it will then. At that point, it's win or else.
Yeah.
Because we can't let it go any further than this. It's a difficult thing, because if you have a stretch like this, in mid-December to mid-January, it's not as nearly as panicked, depending upon what your position is, in the table. But yeah, sitting here with no wins and then losing on Saturday at home.
Oh, against a team that hasn't won yet. Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to have to, at that point, then the thought process begins at that point.
Yeah.
Should he stay or should he go? Yeah. I'm sure a lot of fans are already there.
They've been there since
but
for
it's
a long time.
Yeah, but this is a long season. But I think, for me, this Saturday is kind of a make or break. Yeah.
It's crucial. It's crucial for his future at the club. I think he himself has kind of made the rod for his back with this, in terms of he's kind of pushed it on to the fact that we haven't had these players available. He's pushed it on to injuries. He had said the other week, I've never had this situation where I've had so many players injured and ill at the same time. It's like, okay, well, this is where you're gonna put your eggs in this basket of injuries and illness. They're back now, so you have no excuses now. If you do not win, Sean, then like you said, the conversations are going to happen.
I will say this real quick so we can get to Q&A, but the mindset, though, is a little bit different, because who do you bring in? The ideal situation is Sean Dyche gets us through this year, keeps us up, and then you're opening the new stadium with a higher profile manager. You're opening the stadium with the guy who's then going to be part of the project moving forward. If you fire Dyche, now you either are bringing in an interim, or you're trying to get the guy who's going to be part of the project to take us forward in the new stadium, but he's going to have to finish off this year first. It messes up the plan if you fire Dyche. But if you have to do it, you have to do it, because we have to survive this season. It's critical. But it messes up the plan. You get off track. You're off track at that point. So
Well, we will talk about managers here in a minute with our Q&A, but we are going to move into the Q&A now. Our first question is from our friend Jay Colton, who's been on the show before. His question is, if you were Friedkin after you get the board set up, would you sack Dyche? We've just kind of talked about that. If things are going well, I don't think he gets sacked right away. I think he has opportunity to see through the season. And then I agree. I do think we will start to move in a different direction. I don't imagine he'll be part of the Friedkin era for very long. I think we'll be very along the lines of Martinez when Shiri first bought the club, is he got to see out the rest of the season, or just about the rest of the season, until it became like, I don't know why we sacked him with a couple of games to go, but until it was like, well, we have to get him out. We lost to Sunderland away, and to keep the, that kept him up. And so Bashiri said, I'm going to, lay my hammer down now. You're out of here.
So to answer Jake's question, I would say yes, but ideally you don't have to do it until after this season.
Exactly.
Because if you don't have to do it until after the season, that means we're fine. We stayed up, we got through it. And then you bring in a big splash. So the answer to the question is Friedkin ultimately is going to bring in his own manager. It's all a matter of what our situation is at the time.
I agree. And we'll go ahead and go to this next question that stays in the manager line. But this came from the Toffee Blues account. But since the Friedkin news, Everton been linked with Southgate, Potter, and Carsley. If and as we've kind of talked about, when Dyche leaves, what is a manager? Who would you take? And it doesn't have to be one of those. If there's anybody in your mind,
it's tough to answer. I don't see Gareth Southgate.
No, not at all.
I mean, he's I don't see that. I cross him off right away. But
big time. Yeah.
I've liked Potter.
Yeah.
I've liked Potter. Sorry, of course, we're talking about free. Is that Friedkin's? Is that ultimately his plan? So I'd probably take Southgate and Carsley out of that list, and then I would stick with Potter and Sarri.
I really like Graham Potter. I think that I would like to see him at Everton personally. I know there's been this talk that he's a fragile manager. He can't take stick from the fans, and obviously being in a club like Everton, where taking stick from the fans is what you're going to get every week. It's just kind of part of the club. But I love his style of play. I would really like to see him at the club the size of Everton, because it's not a club like Chelsea where he has this looming specter of like, oh, you're gonna get sacked, man. You're gonna get sacked. Like, you're gonna finish 8th and get sacked. It's not a club like Brighton where they have a pretty. I like Brighton. I like the model they run. I think they have a ceiling that is 7th, 6th place. I don't think they've looked good this season. They have a very young, very capable manager in Horsler, who I think he's destined for a lot of really good things. But I do think they have a ceiling with Graham Potter. I just like him. I just like him. I like the English aspect.
I have too. Yeah.
I think being able to bring him in, and just see the style of football and build a team around him. I think players like Ndai would do so well under him. I think that there's just the idea of Graham Potter really appeals to me, especially with other names that we've had out there. I can't think of anybody else that I would, especially from other Premier League clubs. Nobody I would grab. I don't want an Eric Ten Hag. I don't want some manager who's been through it. But I think what we really need to look forward to as a club is a young, upcoming manager. I think that's not something we've really had the opportunity to go after for a while.
Potter's older than I just looked up Potter. He's 49. That surprised me. I thought he was younger, but
I mean that's for a manager.
For a manager, that's middle age for a manager.
You'd say he has another 15 to 20 years in his pocket if he wants it. Yeah. You look at people like Roy Hodgson and what's the other fella who's it's not Roy Hodgson, but regardless. I would love to see him at the club. Of the names who've been linked with, he's the one that appeals to me the most. There's a lot of comments here. Somebody said David Weir. Somebody said David Moyes as well. I mean, Moyes, to me, Moyes is the interim manager. If we sack Dyche, it would be Moyes that comes in my mind.
Yeah, good call.
And I don't think that's the worst idea ever. I can imagine he'd be okay with just having 6-7 months under his belt at Everton again, and I would like to think he'd keep us up, but there's no guarantee of that. He's obviously brought a club down before in Sunderland, but next question is a silly one from our good friend Cedric Sterling. Would you take Steve Walsh back as director of football? He should have never been director of football in the first place. He was a scout who never had any idea how to do transfers at all, and then he got brought in as a director of football because he found N'Golo Kanté and Riyad Mahrez. It was a silly thing. It's one of those things you look at from the Mashiri era, and you're just like, why? Like, why?
I would like to see Kevin Thelwell not have to go down the hall to the accountants to do all sorts of math to see who do we need to sell and who can we afford to buy.
Yeah.
I would like to see Kevin Thelwell in a sound stable financial situation and see what he could do, because I don't think he's done a horrible job.
Yeah.
I also like that I love his transparency in his communication the past 2 years, which is something the forum we clamored for a while. And then, of course, he was a part of the BBC podcast, and then he's had regular communication since then, which has been great. I like Kevin Thelwell, and with the right manager and the right owner, I'd like to see what he could do for our football club, honestly. But again, that's another Friedkin call. You don't know. The football operations might be completely and probably will be completely transformed. Who knows who he'll want to bring in? But
I didn't even think of Kevin Thelwell being a casualty with Friedkin coming in. It really didn't cross my mind. That is very true. He might have something totally different in mind. I agree that he's done for the circumstances, for the hand he's been dealt. I think he's done a great job. I think the fact that he's not really had to work as closely with Mashiri as, say, like a Marcel Brands did, where he was constantly getting hindered by what Mashiri wanted and the agents that Mashiri was friends with wanted, in terms of the players that he could sign. I think Kevin Thelwell, even though he's had very limited financial resources, he's been able to do his job in the way that he's wanted to and be able to bring in the players that he wanted to.
I mean, PSR is obviously paramount for any Premier League owner, except for maybe a very small handful. But the margins that he's had to deal with, that Kevin Thelwell, it's crazy. I'm sure he could not make a move or even think about a player move, incoming or outgoing, without having all sorts of math done to see where we are. Yeah, so credit to him.
Absolutely. This also comes from Cedric, but who would your dream signing be in January? If we're
Oh,
looking at a situation where we have money to spend and are able to bring somebody in, who would you bring in? I have somebody in mind that you probably wouldn't guess, but I want to hear what yours is first.
Richarlison.
Yeah, I like it. Ooh, I like that one. Yeah, bring him back. Seriously.
Get him back.
Oh man, just on loan, just for half the season, it'd be amazing. It would just get the feel good factor going for that last season at Goodison, getting somebody like Richarlison who's iconic, getting to score a few goals, get him holding up another flare or something. That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that. Oh man, you taught me. Dang it. My
Friedkin could fly him in on a private jet.
Yeah, he could. Big time from London, So we'd get everybody who's like, well, that's bad for the environment. It's like, yeah, but it's Richarlison. Come on.
Right.
For me, there is. I'm looking at the fullback position because that is such a huge need for us. And there's a guy who plays for Wolves whose name I can't remember his first name, but it's Nori. T-Nouri. I think he's fantastic. I've watched him play for Wolves many times. I think he's a very, very good fullback. I think he would look great in our team. I know he plays as more of a wingback for Wolves in Gary O'Neill's system. I think he would look just as right at home as a fullback for us. And just in terms of the depth we need, the fact that we need fullbacks, and the fact that there aren't a lot of really good fullbacks out there. It's a position that's become so heavily specialized and yet so vitally important. As wide players have gotten better, as the way teams play and attack those wide areas have changed, I would love to see him come in, or just a fullback in general. Yeah, there's not too many others that come to mind that I would feel would be realistic for us, but especially a right back, we just need, and we'll see how Patterson kind of comes along if he's going to get his chance again. I'm kind of dubious whether or not he really gets many chances to play because I still think Dyche will pick Coleman and Young over him. Unless there's been a big change in that relationship and a big change in the way he views Patterson's game, I don't imagine that he's going to get as many opportunities as he would really like. And I could even see him kind of moving on in January.
Well, keep in mind that we have a new signing coming in roughly in November if things stay on track, and Armando Broja.
Yes, as a striker. Yeah, right. I mean, it'll be nice to see him get into the team and see what dimension he brings. I know that we're hoping that Trimidi could kind of come around. Obviously, he had his injuries, had it for a while now. We were hoping that he could be somebody that could be more involved in the team. To bring in Broja seems like, well, this is what we have to now because Trimidi's out. Yeah. We need to have that striker depth. And I don't know what you think of Beto, but I think he's just not it. I do not think he's a Premier League player at all. I don't even think he's close to a Premier League player. I think he looks so bad out there that it's almost kind of like he's so one of those like Nias sort of signings where it's just like, man, like. What did we see in this player truly? I know we needed a striker. I know we had to have some sort of depth, but it's just
our winter signings potentially could be a trio of Chermiti, Broja, and Dele Alli.
Dele Alli, ooh.
We are winter signings.
Would you like to see him stay?
What's that?
Would you like to see Dele Alli stay? Do you think the reason that he hasn't played at all because of this financial situation with Tottenham?
Yeah, it depends on what the finances look like. It's more sentimental than anything. Although knowing if I believed that a 80% of what the player that Dele Alli was before he went through all this is still there.
Yeah.
If the finances work, it's a no-brainer.
Truly.
From a football standpoint, then obviously from a sentimental standpoint, everything that Everton's done for him as he's gone through everything he's gone through, would love nothing more than to see him in a blue shirt running out there for us. But yeah, that's just who knows how that's all going to work out. So I'm just kind of joking. But we will have Broja back from injury. We will have Chermiti back from injury. All of a sudden we have striker depth. Yeah. I remember when we had one, so it wasn't too long ago.
One, and then it was
things are looking up in that regard. So.
Oh, and look at Neil Maupay, but now, by the way, he's top of the league with Marseille. Like it's not like
of course
he seems to fall upwards sometimes. It's interesting.
Right.
We've got one more question. Another one from Toffee Blues, but maybe a little silly one. But do we all agree that Iliman Ndiaye is the one that made Friedkin change his mind? I'm sure that Friedkin was pretty interested in Everton before he saw Iliman Ndiaye play. But I mean, Iliman Ndiaye changed my mind
Yeah.
on the way Everton might be this season. I know that we're not going to get a European place. That finishing top half is like the pinnacle of what we're going to do this season. If we get to that point, it's going to take a lot of work. But
yeah,
he's just one of those players, man, that you really want to build this team around. That we have to build this team around. And it's just, again, we talked about it already. It's exciting. He's an exciting player. It's really like he's the ones who gets butts off seats. That's every pundit I've heard talk about him. He's like, he's the kind of player, he gets the ball, everybody stands up because something's going to happen if he gets the ball.
Yeah.
A foul, a forward pass, something key is going to happen in that moment.
Well, and to clarify the part of that question, Friedkin didn't change his mind.
Right, exactly.
He wanted to own Everton all along. He just had to, he had to dot the I's and cross the T's with 777 and their associates, and he did it. And so now, hopefully in a few weeks, it'll be a reality. And the positive thing is that everyone seems to think that this is going to be a relatively smooth approval process. Nobody sees any roadblocks. So it's going to take several weeks, but hopefully it'll be an early Christmas present for us.
Yeah, it'd be lovely. It's nice. It seems to be what everybody wants. Like you alluded to, it's what's going to be best for the club. It's what everybody seems to think is going to be best for the club going forward, and just financially getting us better, getting us stable, being able to push forward, truly push forward, and not have these false dawns and not have these things where we think we're going to go forward and then we sack a manager again, and we think we're going to go forward and then we have an awful start to the season and we're all feeling down on ourselves. It'll be good to find that stability. It'd be good to be able to actually have a plan going forward where it's not just having to scramble and make sure that we can survive another month.
Well, I really hope that we're all have something to celebrate on Saturday, because if we beat Palace, no matter how we beat Palace, but if we win on Saturday and that caps off this week, I think everyone can celebrate a little bit and feel a lot better about everything. So hopefully that comes to fruition for us.
Get that feel-good factor back at Goodison, baby. We need it. Get it back in Finch Farm, get players smiling again, get some good training videos out. Don't feel like you got to put out a stadium update every weekend now.
It's time for them to suck us back in. It is the timetable, right? It's, the torture goes on until you just kind of reach the tipping point, and then, they bring us back in. So they'll bring us back in on Saturday. They'll reel us right back in.
I like it. Let's do it. Up the Toffees. Well, Jeff, it's been a pleasure. We have ran on a while, but I've really enjoyed the conversation, man. I love your insight. I love the way you are able to approach things from your journalistic standpoint, man. So thank you for coming on the show today, Jeff.
Thanks for having me. Yeah,
of course, brother. Hopefully we'll get you on again before long. But all right, Up the Toffees. 3-0 to the Blues on Saturday against Palace, and let's move onwards and upwards, Evertonians. All right.